Hello, my quilting friends. My name is Leah Day, and welcome to episode 122 of the podcast. And today I'm going to be sharing all of my tips, tricks, philosophy, and drawing techniques for designing your own goddess quilt. And this is going to be a super short introduction because I want to get straight into the design work. But this episode really is all about my new books, and that is Dream Goddess, the 3-month planner and creativity journal, and Leah Day's Goddess Quilts, Journey into Light and Love Through Art Quilting. So both of these are new books that are just coming online this week. You can check them out at leahday.com/goddess. Now, I have not ordered boatloads of books, guys. It is the end of the year, and I'm kind of, I'm just wanting to minimize that. So I have not ordered that many, meaning we're probably going to run out. So if you are wanting to get a copy from us and have me sign it, please go ahead and place your order this week. Once we run out, that's probably going to be it until January. So again, that address is leahday.com/goddess. Now, if you are living in another country, these are kind of heavy books, okay? And if you're in another country, obviously you are going to want to save on shipping. So please also know that both of these are uploaded to Amazon, and you should be able to find them in Amazon UK, Amazon AU, Amazon CA for, I think that's Canada. So you should be able to find these in the Amazon store in your country for Amazon Prime free shipping. So that will help you save a little bit on shipping. And also the large print edition of Leah Day's Goddess Quilts. I have a large print edition too. Now, this large print is standard large print, meaning I followed all of the rules and standard settings for typeface large print. So if you are a large print person, please know that that is an option for Leah Day's Goddess Quilts. Just look for that on Amazon. You'll be able to find it. So in this particular situation, I'm saying, that absolutely works great for us to just go on ahead and buy these books anywhere that you like to buy books online. They should also be available from barnesandnoble.com. And I'm in the process of uploading the ebooks to different places as well. So yes, lots of different places that you can find these. And of course, it really helps me out if you get the book and you like it to share a review. That helps us out quite a lot. Of course, share with your friends. Let them know that you enjoyed the books as well. That really fills my bucket and that helps us out an enormous amount. So one last thing before I finish up and we go into designing a goddess quilt. You might be wondering where in the world I'm at. Because if you're watching the video, of course, this looks kind of strange. I am in my bedroom closet, and this is my new sound recording booth where I am now narrating audiobooks. And so I set this up and recorded the audiobook for Leah Day's Goddess Quilts. This is not quite available yet, but it will be available soon. Probably, I'd say by December 2019, this will be available as an audiobook everywhere you like to buy audiobooks. It is going to be everywhere and then some. I'm going to try and get it everywhere it needs to be online. So you can find that. That is me narrating it. It's about 2 hours long, so it's not super long. But I'm going to keep the price down so that way it's affordable and you can enjoy listening to me narrate the book if that is something that interests you. I had so much fun narrating this, guys. It really is challenging. It's interesting. It's something different. I had so much fun putting this whole thing together, and I really love this. And this is kind of the direction that I'm wanting to move into of using my voice in more ways. So the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to start tomorrow narrating Mally the Maker and the Queen in the Quilt. That is my quilt fiction novel about a little girl and her adventures in a magical quilt world. So I cannot wait to get started. It really feels like narrating Goddess Quilts was a great first step to getting into the Mally universe and getting back to that, because as soon as I finish narrating book 1, I'm going to begin writing book number 2. So yes, very exciting stuff. So I hope that you will come and check out the book or the planner, whichever one interests you. Again, on my website, that's leahday.com/goddess. And you can also find these books anywhere you buy books online. So now we're going to go straight into our podcast episode all about designing your own goddess quilt. Hello, my quilting friends. My name is Leah Day, and welcome to episode 122 of the podcast. And to celebrate the launch of my new book, Leah Day's Goddess Quilts, I am going to be teaching you about goddess quilts today. I'm going to be sharing about the design process, the philosophy behind these quilts, why I make them, why I love them so much, why they are different from other styles of quilts, and kind of the principles, the guiding principles that carry me through and kind of guide how I design, and which quilts get made and which quilts end up staying as drawings. I'm going to go through, I've spread out all of the goddess quilt drawings that I have. I kind of keep everything in a bin here, and I took everything out of the bin. And we're going to go through this and talk about the different quilts that I've designed over the years. And I'm going to talk about where things worked and where things really didn't work, some lessons, rules for the road, some things that I really just don't advise in general when it comes to inspiration for a style of quilt like this, because there are a lot of temptations that can come with this. When you make a quilt and it's about a deep emotion or it's about something that you're working through, it can be very tempting to go towards the dark side, to go towards the negative. And I'm going to say throughout this entire podcast and throughout this, and this really is a lesson, guys, throughout this entire lesson, to focus on the light and to always come into designing a quilt like this with a positive frame of mind, with a positive focus, hope, gratitude, some sort of inspiration that is helping you focus on the lighter side, happier side of emotions rather than the darker side. And the reason is these quilts are very, very time consuming to produce. They're really, really time consuming to make. And making a quilt with emotion throughout the process, from prepping the fabric to cutting the fabric to piecing, appliquing, putting it together to quilting, and usually I quilt these very, very densely. Throughout that entire process, whatever the theme of the quilt is, whatever thing I've been working on or munching on throughout, is the thing that's on my mind throughout the entire process, which means that if I'm focusing on a negative emotion, such as, just for an example, one of my quilts, a long time ago, I made a quilt that was entirely focused on the pain of my past and bad things that people had said to me and ways that I had been hurt. And it was called Sinkhole. This is the design, the original design that I created for that. It was kind of a 3D circle effect. It looked like a hole. I ended up in that black hole for 6 months. So I can say this is something that you need to watch out for. It is so tempting to think that going to the negative is going to somehow set you free, and it absolutely won't at all. Even incorporating, I took this and I already had a secondary image, and that was Emergence, this goddess. So I already had this design and I had another plan for it. I was going to put this with a whole cloth, like she was emerging from a whole cloth, which is kind of a cool inspiration. Instead, I put her with Sinkhole, and I made that quilt. This is called Emergence. Even this quilt still had almost too much negativity, or at least it took a long time for me to get to a point to recognize the true symbolism within this quilt, which was she was emerging from the sinkhole. She was forgiving the pain of her past. She was forgiving and letting go of all of those things. And this is one of those tricky things that this goddess series has played on me, is that sometimes I will design a quilt and I won't actually be able to recognize what it symbolizes for years. And two quilts in particular really, as I was writing the book and had many years of experience and perspective to bring to the table, only as I was writing the book did I finally wrap my brain around, oh, that's what that quilt means. I mean, you'd think, I'm making this quilt, I know what it means, but sometimes they can play tricks on you a little bit, and you can be making something thinking it means one thing, and then you end up with a symbol and you're like, oh, wow, that means something totally different. That what she actually looks like is something very different. So I just want to, start with that. I want to start from intention. This is the most important thing. I think this is the most important thing to get right. Because if you go at this with the wrong intention, you can really be setting yourself up for a lot of emotional trauma. A very difficult quilt to create. You might not end up finishing it because it'll just get really bogged down and really, really heavy. And then psychologically, it's not very good for you. So, yeah, I am gonna share my pits, where I've done good, where I have failed, in a sense, where it's just really missed the mark. And in the case of Sinkhole, the original that I worked on for about 6 months, I actually took this quilt outside and caught it on fire intentionally. I set it on fire and I burned it. So it was, the original is no more. Simply because it was so negative, I did not want to even throw it away in the trash. I wanted to get rid of it and erase it completely. And that was very cathartic. But, I would have liked to have not had the 6 months of my life wasted on something that was very, very negative. So let's start just going through this, and I'll just kind of, as I dig through this pile, I can kind of just explain a little bit about all of these designs and the inspiration, what was learned, where certain things have worked, where certain things haven't. Some of these designs you'll see are not goddesses. Like this is a design that has not been made into a quilt yet, but the design itself is, I'd say, very close to being finished. The inspiration for this one, and I'll just describe it here real quick for the audio. This is a kind of a cloaked woman, and she has a hood surrounding her face. You can't really see her hair. You see that she's a woman. She's wearing a dress, and she's holding a light, like a lantern. And the inspiration for this was, I was just thinking a lot at the time of all the different people and all the different books I've read over the years and how they have kind of lit my path, and that path, it's like they're torchlights along the way, or lampposts along the way, that you never really know what you're going to read or hear that's going to eliminate the next step on the journey or help you reach the next step on the journey. And the journey continues. And I think the reason why I didn't finish this is that the woods were really a struggle with this, trying to get those right. And I think I just didn't have time to really sit down and play and explore. And what you have to do with this is drawn on tracing vellum. And the basic step, when I'm at this stage, I kind of like the goddess figure. I feel like she's pretty much actually done. She's got good proportions. She has a good expression. She looks, in my opinion, pretty much solid in that frame. So now at this stage, I need to cover this with tracing vellum, and then go over it, trace her out, and then with another piece of tracing vellum, I'll grab another piece here. Go over it and trace the trees, and just start building the trees on top of her. So that way, I no longer have to worry so much. It's really hard to draw the background or the foreground, like the extra bits in a piece, in a goddess. It's really hard to draw all of that at once. And so I don't draw it that way. It's drawn in layers, so I'll get the goddess looking right, and then I'll concentrate on the background, and then I'll put the two together and make sure that they go well together. And I think in this case, I just didn't have time to do that at the time. I maybe lost interest in that particular design, or it wasn't a strong enough inspiration. And that's okay. It's okay to say, that's a good idea. It's a good idea. It's okay to even say, oh, that's a bad idea. Or simply, that was a nice thing to draw. I just don't need to make it into a goddess quilt. All of that is a-okay. And I want to, to stay right out in the first that I'm not using anything more complicated than a pencil with an eraser on it. That's it. And I truly don't feel like I'm a very good draw artist. I don't feel like I can draw very well. And I'm going to explain exactly how I get around that, because there's lots of tricks, such as, I'll just go in and point them out. I never draw hands and feet. I don't bother. I can't, and I don't even like, the look of, like all those fingers and stuff. It just doesn't look very good in a quilt where you're making something out of fabric. The details can get lost, or they can get just really chunky trying to put them in there. So I make all hands taper down just to sharp points. There are no fingers. They just taper down to sharp points. Same thing for feet. If I even bother having feet in a quilt, most often the girls are wearing dresses, so they don't even have feet. If they have legs, most often they're like wrapped together or braided together or something like that. So there are a lot of ways of getting around the fact that you can't draw something. If I can't get the proportions of a head and neck and shoulders quite right, it doesn't really matter because I'm just going to cover that up with lots of hair anyway. It's part of the reason why I like such big hair on my goddess quilts, because that area can be a struggle. It can be a struggle to get the proportions just exactly right. So if you're listening to this going, oh, I can't draw, and that's your initial barrier to even listening, to even trying, please understand that I can't draw hands and fingers and toes, and I really am not a very good at faces either, which is why a lot of my goddess quilts have no face. They have no eyes, no mouth, no nose. None of them have ears. I've never put ears on a quilt up to now, and that's okay. It's not like they're missing them. And this is the funny thing, is I actually now, looking at all of these, I really love the ones that don't have faces, because they really are a blank slate. You can put anything there. Your mind will fill in those spaces for you. You don't need to put those details in. And in fact, actually, where I have put those details in some cases, they can be a barrier. It's like if I get the lips too big, or the nose too big, or the eyes too big, or too small, or whatever, then there's that judgment of like, you look at it like, man, that's a messed up face. So that it's almost better to leave it blank. It's almost better to leave the face expressionless with no eyes, no mouth, no nose, than run the risk of having someone look at it and be kind of like, that looks kind of funny. You know what I mean? So it's a-okay to not be good at drawing. I'm not all that good at drawing. And I have not allowed that to be a limitation to making the quilts that I want to create. All right, so next one is, this is I Walk the Line. And so this started just as I don't know if I have necessarily the original drawing, but what really inspired this one to move forward was I think I drew this, and then I shot a picture of it on my phone, and then I put it in a app called Prism. Or Prisma, here it is, Prisma, and that's a little app you can get on your phone. And then you can play and do different filters, and those filters can give you different effects. And so this effect just gave me these wild colors, orange and greens and blues and all this beautiful texture. But the thing that caught my eye the most is it gave me these really thick lines between the different spaces. And that looked almost like a stained glass effect. And that caught my eye. And I really started to pay attention to that. And, I just really loved the texture that I got in the triangles and stuff. And so I ended up making I Walk the Line as a stained glass quilt. Now, making it as a stained glass quilt and constructing the top was really fun. And I did a couple videos on that. But then I never quilted it, because the stained glass creates the technique itself. It's basically applique, and then you cover the raw edges of the fabrics, all the different fabrics that are making up the quilt top, with 1/4-inch binding that has been folded under, and you fuse it in place. Well, then you have to secure that down by stitching it on both edges, with black thread. So that way it's all stitched down. So it's all black and it's all stitched down. That took forever. And so I got it all stitched down, and it's slightly distorted. It did some weird stuff. The top itself did some weird stuff. And that alone was enough for just like, I just put it away, so I just folded it up and put it away. So understand that, sometimes a design can be great. Perfect drawing. I mean, I still absolutely love this quilt. It's one of my favorites. I think I did a moon version with it, with just a moon and a plain sky. And then what I ended up actually making was the one with the sun with rays branching out into the sky. I love it. It's one of my favorite quilts, but because I hit that snag in the construction, it remains unfinished. And it's on my list to pull it out and get it done. And I think what I'm going to do is kind of force it back into submission by basting it on the long arm, and kind of I have kind of some distortion going on through here. And I think it might just be how it was pulling or something. I don't really even know. And this is the thing, you know, stuff happens, even to me. And I'm like, I don't know what's going on. It's, and it's frustrating to not get the effect that you want. It's frustrating to not get the perfect quilt top that you want. And in a lot of cases, I just don't have time to troubleshoot it. I don't have time to mess with it. It's my own personal project. It's not something I'm doing for a quilt along. It's not something I'm doing for a pattern. And the temptation, it's not necessarily a temptation. It's just my default to just say, all right, I can't deal with it, and I just put it away. So I'm trying to pull these things out, guys, and get these things finished because there's a whole other world of learning here that I want to share with you, and stuff that I really want to pursue and I want to play with, and then I also want to figure it out too. It would be really nice to figure out exactly what went wrong with that, and then also too, it's a finished design, so that could totally become a panel. I think that's gorgeous. Okay, so next one, this is the most colorful one on the table. So Express Your Love was a quilt along that I did in 2013. I did not write a pattern for it. It was early days. It was one of the first quilt alongs that I did. I was trying to attempt to do it step by step, but I didn't have a pattern to follow, so it really wasn't working. And so this pattern is not currently available, but it is on my list, and in the next couple of months, I'm going to tackle this. We're going to have a pattern. Right now it's available as fabric, but I'm going to do a pattern, a proper pattern. Here is I think this might be either, if this is not the original, this is one of the very, very early pictures. And you can see, I drew this on tracing vellum, and then I was checking to see how it would fit. This is the log cabin version of it that I made. So that fit over log cabin blocks. I mean, you can do all kinds of cool stuff. Tracing vellum is definitely your friend because it allows you to layer and test things like this, like you draw a drawing and then you put it on top of it and then you can see through it, and you don't have to have a light box, which is really nice. I have a light box, but I don't always want to pull it out. I'm lazy. I don't always want to pull it out and mess with it. Okay, so here is a good one. So this was Eternal Love, and this is the drawing that I had in Illustrator, and this actually was originally drawn and designed as a panel for Island Batik. We were going to try and do this in Batik, and this is actually the original, and this is a perfect case of saying that the facial features can pull you out of a design. Like, her nose is way too big. Just absolutely way too big. And so, this was like the first try. It didn't end up working as fabric. We was screen printing. It didn't feel right, didn't look right, didn't come out right. So I just said, okay. And it needed revision anyway because her nose is just gigantic. And so then more revision happened. Of course, I changed her hair quite a lot. And then this became the drawing for the pattern, which of course then when you do fusible web, it flipped it. So the version of it that I've actually made is flipped. So if you're looking at that going, that looks funny, it's because what you've seen is the reverse image like that. So it's just one of those funny stories, and I honestly don't need any of these anymore because I've already got that as a pattern. So done and done. I can kind of clean out all of these designs, which will be really nice. I'm not really sure. This was just, playing around, sketching something. I think I was playing with hair, and I think this was drawn off of my original Mother Earth goddess that I did as a cross stitch. So it was just me playing around. There's not really much to it, but I like just playing with forms and figures. I just like playing around with different shapes. And guys, it's never a waste of time to just play around and draw and see what you're going to get. This little mermaid, same thing, just playing around drawing. Her heart-shaped face is a little bit on the weird side. I think that might have been what kind of stalled me out. I like the mermaid body overall, but it wasn't enough. I think I drew a little border to go around her, which was really cool. Yeah, that was kind of neat, but it wasn't enough to be like, oh, I've got to go make that. It didn't have, this is another thing. This is pretty, but in order to be a goddess quilt, it really needs to have some level of meaning. There's another layer there. There's more to it than just being a pretty picture of a mermaid. And I drew it, I liked it, it was cute, but there wasn't anything there for me to really go, oh, that's gonna help me think about this emotion that I want to work on, or help me tap into gratitude or happiness or contentment. This is going to remind me to be peaceful and go with the flow, or none of that was clicking. with this particular drawing. And that's why, she just remained a drawing. Very pretty. Still, I'm not dissing it, guys. It's just, some things are just drawn just for fun, right? Okay, so on to kind of the reverse side of that, and that is drawing with an emotion that is on the negative side. And I think this one is a goddess that is very linear. I think I was in the mode of lino cutting. I was thinking about something that I could print on fabric. I could cut it out as a stamp. And so that's really where the inspiration was. I'd add 2 colors. So just 2 colors. So this was intended to be cut out and stamped on fabric. And so because of that, I shaded in everything that was going to be either carved out or not carved out. So it's, just it's a very graphic image. And it's a woman just kind of looking down and she's crying. And so it is grief, in a lot of ways. And I didn't write any notes about it. I think this was maybe a couple years ago. And ultimately, it was fun to draw. It maybe helped me get over whatever was making me sad that day, but I did not need to make that into a quilt. Again, negative emotions, to set and make this would be setting with that grief, that sadness, whatever was going on for a very long period of time. Now, if I carved it into a stamp, maybe not so much. If I did something with lino cutting or fabric, that maybe not so much. But if I made this into something substantial, even 20 inches wide, that would be a lot of time. If I did, hand applique, fusible applique, anything like that, that would be a lot of time to spend looking at that image, looking at all those rings of grief. Yeah, and this feels very heavy to me. It does not feel light. And most essentially, and this is a key to goddess quilts, I really feel, all goddess quilts must have some hopeful element. Now, there is a caveat to that, and I will share that, but some hopeful element. There should be some element of, this is going to pass. We're moving forward. There is the light. The end of the book, Leah Day's Goddess Quilts, the whole last page is all about just focus on the light, focus on the positive, not in a cheesy way, but just it is so, so easy to go the other way, and to say, oh, let me just make a quilt all about grief. You'll end up grieving the entire time you make it, and you might not feel any sense of relief at the end of it. And so I don't think that's necessarily a positive. Now, if I took this drawing and I redrew it so that she's maybe not crying, but, just simply introspective, and then had another element, maybe a sun, maybe put her into more of a heart shape, something along those lines. I think all of those are positive ideas. Again, fun to draw, didn't need to be made into a quilt. Okay, so where does the sketch start? Because I think you're seeing a lot of things that look so nice and neat and perfect. This is often the beginning of a sketch. What the heck is that? What is that? I mean, that doesn't even look like anything, right? This is an inspiration inspired by my cousin, Emmy. She rides horses. And I asked her to send me a picture of her on one of her horses, and she has this amazing hair. Emmy, I've always been jealous of her hair. And so she sent me these amazing pictures. And so this is just the start of a goddess quilt inspired, where this is a horse and this is the goddess on the back of the horse. But as you can see, this is a great big old mess of lines. It is not much of anything right this second. And that's okay. This is where I start. Mostly it's proportion. So, nice big head, circle for neck, circle for shoulders, circle for torso, circle for waist, bigger circle for bum, and then legs, knee. So this is basic structure, okay? So any drawing class is going to teach you basic drawing structure of a human body is always based on these kinds of circles. Okay, arm, here comes an arm, and circles and ovals, okay? So this is how you get proportion down. This is how all of my drawings begin. And as you can see now, proportion-wise, we can see the horse's back should be somewhere here, right? And it's way down here. So this is off. So, basically I would need, if I wanted to fix this and actually really start drawing and making it proper, is I would pull the horse out and get the goddess's body solid, and then I would bring the two of them back together again, right? So there I've got a rough form just based on those circles that is proportional and that's looking better, but as you can see, the horse absolutely doesn't fit within that. Okay? So yeah, that is rough. And then it gets better from there. Like, and and that's where I start. I have to let it be that rough to get an idea down, and then I have to allow that to evolve. And we're going to go step by step through some more drawings that are even rougher than that. Okay, more ideas. So this was Duchess Reigns. So Duchess Reigns originally was inspired by the Duchess, which was my first whole cloth show quilt. And I had this vase, and I had like the pomegranate design, and then the goddess herself. I basically just kind of drew a circle and said, okay, that's going to go in the middle of it. And then it drew out from there. And then I decided on the sun rays. And then this was just one variation of Duchess Reigns. This was just one spot of it. And the cats, I tried lots of different angles for the cats. They ended up facing a different way. And actually, this was one idea. I know that looks terrible, but like me screaming, I shot a picture of me making a terrible face, like making it look like I was breathing fire or screaming. And then I drew, this was the first, kind of tracing of that photo. So a lot of times if I'm needing to get something in proportion and I can't draw it with the circles, I can't do this number, like it's just not working every time I try it, it's not working, then what I'll do is I'll actually come out here to the Crafty Cottage, I'll set up my camera on a tripod, and then I'll try and simulate that shape, whatever it is, and it usually doesn't look very good at all. It's just, like I'm sticking my arms out or something like that. I'm aiming to get the proportions. I don't care how I look personally in the shot. So let's say I was aiming for, something like, kind of a gratitude pose, hands at my chest, looking down. Well, having that photo of that, I have the perspective, the angle of my face. I get how big my arms are, how far they actually extend down, because it's really easy to make arms too long or too short, and not have the right proportion. Like, how long does an arm go down? It actually can go down, your elbows go down to your waist, and depending how far down you drop your shoulders, right? So all this is just human biology. What is the best human to base your goddess quilt, your personal goddess quilt on? You, right? So just think of the pose that would fit with the theme of the quilt that you want to make. And I'm really thinking these days that I really want to do one about gratitude and just, I really want to tap into that blessing of life. Just like we are so blessed to be alive. And so I really feel like either here or just open hands, like wide open hands, wide open chest, wide open arms, either of those would be really, really great, right? But as you can see, it would be really easy to get arms that are like 6 feet long, right? In proportion to the head. So just having a photograph of me in this crazy, wild, stupid pose is really helpful, because then I can take that photograph, I can print it out on plain paper, I can take my tracing vellum or tracing paper, put it over on top of it, and then I can just trace that outline of that shape and get the proportion of my body parts in that pose and pull the goddess out of it. Keep in mind, none of my goddesses are realistic, meaning I never go to a photo and then try and recreate that realistically. They are all symbolic. And that's a really important point, because I don't like photorealistic quilts. It's just a pet peeve. Whenever I see them, like the skin tone and stuff with the highlights of, let's say you take a photo and you have a black and white picture, and then you try and pull the different colors, then you always end up with these like weird blotchy pieces all over the place. And it makes me crazy. I don't want to make a quilt that looks like a photo. I just shoot a photo, right? And everybody has different weirdness about that. I've heard from some people that don't want to design in Illustrator, don't want to design on a computer program, because then if they color it, then why would they want to make it into a quilt? They've already made it and colored it in Photoshop or Illustrator. So we're all weird in our own way, right? But yeah, I don't like photorealistic, quilts. If I want a photo, I'll just take a photo. If I want a goddess quilt, it is going to be a symbolic representation of a woman, not a woman shot in a photo. I hope that makes sense. I hope that's clear. That's why, another reason why I don't do hands and fingers, because I'm not aiming to be realistic. It is fantasy. And it's another reason why all of my goddess quilts are nice and skinny. They're, the ideal shape of a woman, in my opinion, and that's why they all have wonderful, gorgeous, long hair. Again, ideal shape of a woman. I can never grow hair that's as long as my butt. I would love to be able to do that, but I can't. So yeah, I just make it in a goddess quilt. So it's symbolic more than anything else. And that goes into, I guess I should go on and show you this one. This is a little bit on the risque side. It does say sexy. I was kind of going through a phase where I felt the need to draw something like that. But this is going to be something I'm going to say. I really feel like words in a quilt is cheating. I really do. I don't think that and I've put words in quilts, guys. I've put words in a lot of quilts, and having done that, I can say it's a cheap way out. It's shortcutting anyone that's looking at that quilt, unless you're making it only for yourself and it's not leaving your house. Words on a quilt are shortcutting anyone else's interpretation of your quilt. Meaning that you're going to look at that quilt and you're going to read the words first, because that's going to capture your attention first. You're not going to actually enjoy the rest of the quilt, because you're going to be reacting to what is actually written on it. So as an artist, I can say words on anything is a cheap way out. It's a cheap way to make people react. It's a cheap way. It's a sucker punch, basically. And, I don't, having put words on quilts, having burned a quilt with words on it, that was sinkhole. I just don't do it anymore. I don't think it's necessary. And another thing is to, I think the goddess quilts, I really feel like one thing I really try and do is make a quilt that is, again, symbolic, could be anyone, and it's hard to say not offensive, but just, yeah, I wouldn't probably not make that sexy goddess as a goddess now, because I feel like it's pushing that line. Okay, so yeah, so this was drawn. This sketch of my face was drawn from a photo. I took it to here, showed it to Josh, and he was like, "No, no, I really don't like that. That freaks me out." And I always listen to Josh's opinion. He can be very blunt, and that's exactly what I need. I need somebody that's not going to yes man me and just tell me it's all great and good. So instead, then I went and got a picture of my cat, Shy Guy, my orange cat at the time. And so I took a picture of him and then played around with that sketch and came up with that. So he's breathing fire. But this is just an early drawing of Duchess Reigns. Here's a picture of what she looked like as an actual quilt. That was just another evolution. Sometimes you'll play with stuff, like this was drawing the trees out and everything, and then it just doesn't work, and that's just another stage of the quilt. The biggest key that I have learned is just don't delete anything. The more layers, the more pieces of tracing vellum, the better in a lot of cases. Okay, so I had several quilts that were kind of, done around this time. This was, 2010. I'm thinking that kind of here it is. The inspiration kind of for this, is this idea of kind of being bound up, the lives that we live, the structure, whatever we have set up, such as, being married and having kids, these things are a blessing, but they also kind of bind us and lock us in place. And it was not a negative, but it's the balance of that, of blooming where we're planted, is kind of the inspiration here. I didn't end up going with this. I never ended up making either one of these into quilts. I think largely because I just really didn't know what to do with the background here. This is too much open, empty space. Same thing here. And, ultimately, I just didn't feel like it didn't feel finished. I do like her hair, her big petals. She's got a big petal hair. I do like that a lot. Maybe it just needs to be pulled together with something else, merged with something else. I don't know. Some drawings just simply need to be drawings, I think, and I just let that happen because I don't want to run with a quilt that's not ready. I don't want to run with a quilt that I don't feel passionate about making. It's not the point. Really, really not the point. This was a good one. This was a couple years ago. Drew this. It was the idea of kind of changing who you are. Whether like kind of changing your mindset. And I like the idea and the symbolism of walking through a waterfall. I walked through a waterfall when I was in high school, and it's pretty powerful because the water is unrelenting, absolutely unrelenting. It will not stop for you, and it will pound you into the rocks if you're stupid. And I can just remember that feeling, that that power of the water. I wanted to try and capture that, couldn't end up doing it. I just, ultimately, I couldn't figure out a way of getting the swirls to work and to kind of work with the waterfall and make it all. I think the goddess is there. She's got a good shape. I'm not so happy with her face, but her shape is generally there, but I just could not capture that waterfall. Maybe I just need to go see more waterfalls. I don't know. A lot of these just, some of them have been made into quilts, but some of them haven't. And this is the reason why. This is one that's, I would say almost perfect. And she just needs her hair fixed. And I actually might set this one aside and make this one. This is my dog Jinjo, my greyhound that we had. We adopted her. Josh and I adopted her after we got married, so it was 2005. And then we had to put her down in 2010. And that story is in the Goddess Quilt book, and it is still very painful. Reading that part of the audiobook was very painful. I actually made 2 whole versions of it, and I had Josh listen to him. He was like, I think you need to go with the second one, because through the first one I pretty much cried the whole time. So yeah, it still is very, very upsetting, but I think making this quilt would be really good. I think I just didn't have time to finish her hair, and she needs a little bit of a tweak here on her butt. It's so funny, like this was probably drawn 4 years ago, and it's just so funny, like I don't know. Perspectives and drawing ability and stuff like that, just how I would tackle something now versus how I would then probably put her in a dress instead. Legs are kind of tricky, although I think what I was aiming for here is her legs are pointy the same way Jinjo's legs are pointy. So I think maybe that's where I was going with that. Yeah, she needs more hair, probably smooth out her face so she doesn't have a face. And then, I don't know, I think that I do need to make this because I've been thinking about maybe rescuing another greyhound. I think we're ready for that again. We tried to rescue another one a couple years after Jinjo died, and it was just too soon. So maybe that's something on the list. And I'm going to set that one aside because I think I would really enjoy making that one. Okay. I do a lot of just random sketches. Again, this is where things start. And this would seem to be like a whole avenue of kind of angel shapes. Angel shapes or fairy shapes, kind of whichever one you want. I think these are more angel shapes though. And I think I was just running down that tangent. This one's be thankful for life's many blessings. Yeah, good stuff, but just not refined. I might just not have time to take something all the way through. This was interesting. I was trying for kind of a paper piece goddess. I didn't end up liking this. It doesn't feel like a goddess because it's angular, and her face is gigantic in relation to her hair, which is not the way my goddess quilts work. It's always face small, hair big. So that's part of the reason why. Guys, paper's cheap. This is why, we can use up as much paper as we want. This is a very old one. This was back in the days of yoga. And I drew this one. I think I started playing with it a couple years ago just to see what else I could do with it. This one, also, I really feel like is almost there. Just, I basically just need to make several different copies of it, keep working on the tree part. It's basically a goddess setting in a prayer pose, kind of roots growing out into the landscape, and then a tree coming out of her head. I like the symbolism here. And the symbolism is, you are rooted, you are connected to the earth. I think I have an apple there that might not necessarily have the greatest symbolism that I want to add to it. But that we can, well, we can bear fruit wherever we're planted. I guess that kind of is a good symbol. To be peaceful and satisfied and content. To me, that is what this is saying now. I don't know when I drew it, if that's what my inspiration was, but that's what's inspiring me now. So yeah, I like that. I think I'll set that one aside. That might be something I pursue. So I had the idea to redo Release Your Light a couple years ago. And the original name of Release Your Light was Light in Me. And so this drawing kind of came out of that. And it was funny, this this block, I actually ended up using that block design in the Sunshine Surprise quilt line. That's block number 12 of Sunshine Surprise. And, so it's really funny how certain things kind of come out of designing these goddesses. That just random block right there ended up pulling out and becoming, part of something very different. I never made the quilt, but I made the block. Here was an idea. I had this drawn a long time ago. This is Three Rivers of Tears. It was a very different quilt with a very different symbolism, and I thought about basically merging those two together. Didn't work. Good idea on paper, not a good idea in reality. I think here I was trying to draw her a face. Wasn't working. That's okay. Then I took that and then I kind of just morphed it and said, okay, well, what if I had her facing the other way and maybe the sun's coming out of her chest? And this started to get really complex. And this is the reason why this quilt didn't end up getting made, is because and I've caught myself doing this, if a quilt is fairly simple to begin with, and I keep it simple, then it usually will go into a goddess quilt and be made. The longer I fiddle with it, usually the worse it gets and the more complicated it gets. It reaches a certain level of complication and it never gets made. It's just too much. I can't think through it, or I don't know where to start, or like in this case, I think I just started struggling with the colors. Could not figure out what the colors should be, and it got to be pretty much just a mess. And when I can't figure out colors, I can't see what it needs to be. It just falls apart. I mean, I can't say anything more than that. Maybe I need more time, perspective. I need to sit with it a little bit. Some of this stuff is just, being kind of in a rush, and these take a lot more time than, I can sit down and with graph paper and draw a new quilt design, because it doesn't have that layer of emotion, of wanting to work on something, of wanting to, in this case, do another version of Release Your Light. That's my style. That, is, that quilt reimagined in another way. And when it gets too bogged down and complicated, then that means it just doesn't need to be made, and that's okay. And then this is the thing, guys. I don't want you to ever feel like you have to make something you draw as a quilt. Sometimes the journey or what you needed was simply to draw and have that bit of experience, or to get that idea out on paper, just to make that pretty thing. I mean, a lot of these drawings that I'm going through, some of them are making me really happy to see again. Some of them not so much. It's just like, some of them I spent a lot of time on and then ended up saying, nope, I'm not there. This was one of them. This is called Forged and Welded. I made this and designed this at the exact same time that I was designing Hot Cast. Here is a sketch of Hot Cast. So I kind of made these as almost sister quilts. And Hot Cast did get made as a quilt, but Forged and Welded did not. And I think a large reason for that is I did get it into the computer program. This was the final image. But then when I started coloring it and drawing the designs and stuff, things weren't working. I had this idea to do some really cool color stuff, but then, the shapes down here weren't working. And then I didn't have the design skills in the computer to be able to break stuff up and make that work better. And yeah, it is what it is. I mean, there's a piece of me that's like, okay, well then why can't I just let this go? Why can't I just throw this away? And that's really hard. I like hanging on to all my little bits and pieces of paper. I really, really do. And so I hang on to them because, you never know. One day something might click And this has happened. This is really interesting. Sometimes this has happened where I'm doing something totally different. I'm working on something totally different. And it's like brainwave. And all of a sudden something clicks. I'm like, now I know how to finish that quilt. Or maybe it's a technique, you know, or maybe it's just a new material that I'm playing with. It's like, that's what I need. And it all fixes it. And then I can go on with it and I can make it and it's no big deal. I think a lot of these, a lot of these that I've just shown you were designed years ago and need to be simplified. I think I was going through a whole tangent of making everything way too complicated. And, you know, being simple for some people, and I'm one of these people, simple is hard, okay? Complex is easy. If you're the type of person where simple is easy, then you need to go complex. You need to push yourself either way. But for me, simple is very, very difficult. So I have to continually simplify my work to try and make it less complicated, to not have it just get so bogged down with all that. So here is a great example of complication. This actually ended up going in a magazine because it was kind of a cool way to design. This is the actual construction design of Shadow Self. This is what is actually pieced. And as you can see, not a lot is actually pieced. There's, probably under 40 pieces in this whole quilt. This is the quilting design, also drawn to scale. And so basically when I made this a master pattern, this was my construction pattern, and then this was my quilting pattern. I printed this out and marked the fabric, marked all these designs on the fabric, and then quilted them. This was for trapunto. So this is all the motifs that go on the quilt that made it puffy. And this was actually one of my best quilts because I really made sure that there was more puff, almost more puff than background fill. In fact, actually, this is what I aim for these days. If I'm going to do trapunto on a quilt, this is what I aim for, more puff than fill. And so it looks really complex here, but this is all that was constructed. This is all that was actually put together to make the quilt. So much, much simpler. Okay, I got a whole slew of other ones here. This is the original drawing from my Cup Runneth Over, and I was in a rush, and I should have redrawn this whole thing 2 or 3 more times, because this is an example of great idea, great concept, perfect first draft. But these lines needed some serious revision, and I did not do it on a small scale. I rushed and went straight to the master pattern. I ended up having to redraw and redraw and redraw and fuss with the master pattern over and over and over and over again. And it really made the whole thing a chore, and it really affected construction of the quilt too. So another great lesson for Goddess Quilts. Any design, really. Keep refining the design until you can imagine piecing everything, or until you know how to piece everything, or you know how to construct everything. If there's still a part of the design that is making you itch, that's just making you kind of go, that's not quite right, oh, I don't like that little part. For me, it's a feeling thing. It's like a toothache. It's not right. It's just not right. There's something in there that's just not right. It's not there yet. And so I should have kept working on that until I no longer had that itchy feeling about it. But I rushed and went on with it. I mean, and this is the interesting thing about these Goddess Quilts, is that some of these have gotten stagnated and did not get made because I took too much time, and some of them stagnated because I rushed. So it's really interesting. It's hard to say which is the better way to go. I mean, it really is. I think that you can bog down either way. This is my first Goddess Quilt. This is my first drawing. This was Life and Fire. And as you can see, she doesn't have arms. And they just didn't fit. So it's okay to not have arms on a quilt. It's okay to not have legs on a quilt. It's okay to not have a head. It's okay to not have, a lot of body parts. I mean, you kind of got to go with what works, what fits, what you need. Here's a great example of simplicity. This is Eye of Calm. Again, drew this, thinking lino cutting almost. So really, really, really simplistic. The quilting design, this was just a quilting design idea I think I was running with, and, didn't end up working because it was way too complex. And I ended up not even quilting hardly at all through the goddess's hair and body because I had silk fabric that just really distorted badly through this area. So Sometimes you don't have to quilt it at all. You know, you can leave it plain, you can leave it blank. It just really depends on your batting and what the quilt needs, right? This was an idea. I did piece this, I think, partially. The hand turned out super, super cool. The goddess, not so much. It just, some designs are not balanced. In this case, the goddess was my focal point. You know, I wanted that to be the thing, but then her symbolism, everything about it just didn't really click, you know? So I made her and then I ended up throwing that one away. It just didn't work. Didn't work. This is Torrent of Fear. So this is one of my favorite goddess quilts. This is the one exception to making a quilt about negativity, where it's a negative thing that you're showing in the quilt. And the reason is sometimes when you show that total negative, in this case, Torrent of Fear, she is standing in a rain cloud of fear. She is being dissolved by fear. She cannot move forward. She cannot change. She cannot grow. She cannot make decisions because fear is trapping her in place. Okay? So that all sounds really, 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 really negative. It's not, because the fabrics that I used have like glimmers of light. The thread I used, I did hand quilting through the rain area. That has like kind of a metallic sheen, definitely lots of little glitters of light. And also, when I look at this, I don't think, oh my God, fear is so bad. No, I ask myself the question, am I stuck in fear? Am I there? Am I in that torrent of fear? And when the answer is no, the quilt has done its job in a positive way, right? Meaning, it helps me identify when I'm stuck in fear. So it's not a negative quilt. I hope that makes sense. So it's okay to make a quilt about something that's, you know, you could say fear is a negative thing. It's okay, so long as you are working on it, you keep the process light, you keep the process free of fear. And in that case, I did that. I pushed myself with that quilt to do things I was terrified of and just did not allow myself to get stuck in fear while I made it. So that's another thing, is that, you know, if a quilt is about something negative, then you need to counteract it as you construct it even, and not get bogged down, not get weighted by that negative emotion. So these are very, very early drawings. This is called Balance. This did get made into a goddess quilt. It was a gift for my yoga instructor, who was my yoga instructor while I was pregnant with James. And then I was just playing around with some different drawings of pregnant goddesses. And then, you know, after I had James, I kind of shut the door on everything to do with pregnancy and stuff. And I just didn't want to roll with any of that inspiration. I kept the drawings, obviously super, super old piece of paper now, more than 13 years old. So I still have these drawings, so I can still pull these out and use these images, right? Another side of negativity. This is a very negative goddess. She's being pulled down into the ground with like nasty vines and hands that are clutching at her. It's almost comical. I mean, this is almost a caricature, really. Now, of course, never made this into a goddess quilt, because it's not a goddess quilt, because she's being tortured. That is not positive. That is very bad. So yeah, this one, I mean, this honestly now makes me laugh. So I don't know. I don't know. It kind of cracks me up. So maybe I should make it into a goddess quilt. This was another sketch of that, you know, bound by love kind of idea. And then this is the original, Dream Goddess. So drew this at night in bed, and then I drew the landscape above, and it just kind of all flowed together. And even as a sketch, I looked at her and she made me ask a question. And that is what you're looking for. You're looking for a drawing that will make you think, that will make you ask yourself a question that will make you grow. So the question that Dream Goddess made me ask is, what are you dreaming of? And it's a simple, simple question, but it's surprisingly powerful, because you would think, you know, and in the case of, for me, you know, I'm continually working towards living the life that I want to live. This is my continual goal on a daily basis. This is why I work from home with my family. This is why I share videos online. This is why I don't travel and teach, because I have intentionally created the life that I am dreaming of. But even making Dream Goddess, when I drew Dream Goddess, I knew there was even more that I could do, even more that I was avoiding or scared of even trying, such as writing a fiction novel. You know, I wanted to do that for years, but I just kept standing in my own way and stopping that from happening. So making this quilt was even more powerful because as a sketch, she was making me ask questions. And if a sketch is making you ask questions, you're going to be asking that question through the entire quilt process. What are you dreaming of? What do you want? What do you want out of your life? And let me tell you, it is hard to work on a quilt that is asking you questions because it is chatty. But it's good. It's definitely a push. And that's a good thing. But it's not always easy. And that's why Dream Goddess took me 3 years to make, right? It's not always easy to have the answers to that question. But this ultimately is the goal for a goddess quilt, in my opinion, is for it to be symbolic, for it to represent who you want to be or where you want to go with your life. That might seem really scary or woo-woo or out there, but that is what these quilts are to me. So that is where I feel like this is the most important thing to really focus in on as you're drawing your quilt, is asking and answering that question. Where do you want to go? What do you want out of your life? What do you want more of? You know, there is the question of what do you want less of, but really I think what do you want more of is a better question to be asked, and, to be asking. I think that's healthier. Because if we are focusing on what we don't want, then we're going negative. We're going with, oh, I don't like this, and oh, I don't like that, and kind of getting into the resentful kind of complaining side of life. Focusing on how we can make positive changes in our own lives, that we are responsible for our own lives, and that we have the ability to change and bend and grow and become different beings. That's Goddess Quilts, guys. That is the whole process. Absolutely. Okay, so now I want to share with you the 2 goddess quilts that I have been working on. We're going to start with this one. I'm going to carry you through kind of step by step the series of drawings that I made and explain my thought process behind, what was going on with it, and then where I reached the design, and then if I think it's going to actually be successful or not. So zoomed in here just a little bit, some of these drawings are going to be slightly faint, so I hope that you're going to be able to see okay. All right, so here is where this design started. I had the name of the quilt, and this is kind of a dangerous thing to start with because I had Eye of Calm, my beautiful calm goddess quilt, really a celebration of pregnancy, just really in my opinion, this is one of my most peaceful meditative quilts. It's about acceptance, and so the name Eye of Calm, and then of course last month I had a miscarriage. I shared about that. I've been kind of processing through that, and I started sketching and stuff, and then I had the name pop in my head, Storm of Loss. So at the outset, I would say this is not going to be a positive quilt. And that's part of the reason why I don't think I will make it. But I want to carry you through the process because I think we need to honor these ideas that pop into our heads as a sketch, as a drawing, something that you put a couple of hours of work into. I think that's A-okay. In fact, actually, I think that's really, really healthy. Some of these sketches, an hour or 2 tops, and help me process through some idea, ask myself some questions. That's all I needed. I didn't need to go through the whole 6-month, year-long, 2 years long, 5 years long process of making it into an actual quilt. And I am getting faster with this, guys. I am working on not getting bogged down with these so that they take years and years and years. So yeah, the name, not all that positive, Storm of Loss. Okay, so that's where I was starting. That was my inspiration. So here's my initial sketch. As you can see, circle for head, circles for shoulders, circle for torso, and then I kind of like this idea of like a twisty legs. And as you can see, this is a funnel cloud. I mean, this is a storm going on here. So this was the idea of a funnel cloud, but the thought, oh, I'll have something positive. Let's just stick a sunshine in here in the corner and have that, like the sun is shining even though there's a funnel cloud over the landscape. And I am allowed to laugh at myself, guys. Yeah, absolutely. Some of my ideas are a little bit on the wackadoodle side, let's just say, and that's okay. You should run with it. I mean, you know, it's all right to do that, and I think it's good. So here's where I went next, really focusing in on that funnel cloud shape, and basically I drew one half of it, folded the piece of paper in half, and then I was able to get the other half of it symmetrically. Always use symmetry. You can fold a piece of tracing vellum or tracing paper in half, and it really makes it easy. So use symmetry to your advantage anytime that you can. My initial idea was that the goddess would be spinning around and her arms would be kind of flailing. Now, flailing arms, hard to capture, really. Ended up not working, but that's okay. One thing that this is really good, you know, in initial drawing, you know, I'm still working with circles here, circle for body, circle for hands, circle for elbows, but I'm also drawing in a temporary eyeball and the direction she's looking in, and also the direction her body is moving. So her shoulder, like the aim is her shoulders coming down where her head's coming around. Like, so her body, I was aiming for a contorted look to her body. Now, whether that actually works or not is another question, but it's good to give yourself little guides like that whenever you're drawing, especially if you're not drawing from an image. Obviously, I think I would have been better off kind of trying to take a picture of what I was aiming for instead. I hope that makes sense. All right, so then I also kind of had this idea, like, okay, well, what's the shape of the funnel cloud? What am I going to be doing in here? And so just started running with some different initial ideas of just having kind of like a little U shapes here on the edges, and then refine that idea some more. So this is an example of how I would just pull out certain shapes, just pull out the funnel, just refine the face. Here I was thinking maybe I'll do facial features with a nose and a mouth and an eyes. Ended up changing my mind completely, but that's okay. I kind of got her arm in, wrapping around her waist, her other arm out, and her head pointing in that direction, another arrow just to guide me. Here I felt like I needed to punch out and figure out what was going on in the background. So I just drew the funnel shape, the landscape, refined that drawing again, this time putting the sun in the corner and having the angles going out, but these rays on this side didn't end up working out right. So then I drew it again. This time I went and got a circle template that actually had rays sticking out at different angles, and I was able to actually do that accurately. So this is rays, like the center of the circle would be way down here and the rays would be coming out that way. So that is how that came together. So now I can take this background and place this on top of any of the others and be able to see what I'm going to get. So that's the idea behind it. I would probably take this drawing if I'm in the process and I'm saying, okay, this is done. I would set this drawing aside. All the rest of this could be thrown away. This is ready to go as far as the background finished, those shapes finished. Okay, so having kind of finished the background and kind of worked through those initial beginning phases, then I really did a major change to the goddess's body. I didn't like her arms sticking out. It looked weird. So brought that in, had her hugging herself instead, and started working on her body shape. But of course, James had a funny opinion. He, looked at that and was like, oh, she looks like an ice cream cone. Where is the cherry and hot fudge sauce? So he was being really silly about that. So yeah, it is good to play around with different shapes, understand, run with an idea. It's just paper, guys. It doesn't matter if it's wrong. The next shape, I actually increased her size because she felt proportionally too small. So I significantly increased the size of the goddess within. How did I do that? Well, basically, I looked at the things that I did like, so basically her shoulders stayed the same and I just kind of thickened all the lines. I just brought it out by, maybe 1/8 of an inch each. And then here I was playing around with just kind of a weird contorted shape to her bottom half. And this is the thing. When one part becomes a problem, in this case, it's her bottom half, it's going to be a problem, it's going to be a problem, it's going to be a problem. It's going to be repeated over and over and over again. And the reason is, I think the main core problem is the funnel cloud shape. Here, like a tornado, bad inspiration. It's just a bad shape. It's not working with this. This is, yeah, it just doesn't work. I mean, I can't really explain why, apart from I drew 20 plus drawings and none of them actually worked properly. So here's another take. I took her face and pointed it the other direction. So I put a little temporary eye in and had her looking down in another direction. Brought her arm up further over her shoulder. And I checked that. I shot a picture and checked that to make sure that that would be proportional, and basically thinking, okay, her hand is there, her other hand is there. And when you actually do this, and a lot of times I'll be sitting there and I'll just like hug myself and make sure, okay, that hand could wrap around that part of my body. That hand could wrap around my shoulder. That would be how that would look. But look at my elbows. Look how high my elbows end up being, so then that squishes and compresses everything on the chest. So you kind of have to keep that in mind and think, okay, well, do I want it there or do I want to bring the arms down more like that? So it's a very different look, same thing, but it's just which one looks better, basically. So played around with that idea. Then tried again on her bottom half. Still didn't work. And I'm also thinking a little bit about hair, and just trying that out. Now I'm playing around with covering up the funnel cloud with some different ideas. And I asked James what he thought a funnel cloud looked like. And I was like, oh, can you just draw me a funnel cloud? I thought I had the sketch somewhere around here, but I think it got covered up by something. But he just, drew me basically this corkscrew shape. And he just drew that real quick. And I was like, all right, yes, that's exactly what I was thinking too. So I started trying to play around with that, and drew that by itself. So this is really good. Again, punch out one thing and just focus on drawing that one thing. Don't try and draw, a goddess, a funnel cloud, a landscape, a sun, all in one picture. It's really hard. It's okay to punch one thing out, draw that one thing, and then put it back together again. Here I was still struggling to get this bottom half right. I started running out any inspiration. When the corkscrewy idea didn't work, then I was like, all right, well, maybe, straight lines, maybe piecing all of this like chaotically with half square triangles would look good, something like that. And now I kind of look at this and I think, well, maybe if I brought this out instead of going with the funnel cloud and, made that into a peak, maybe even a mountain peak, so she is by herself, but she's obviously the peak of a mountain, right there. That's an example of all of a sudden something clicks. All of a sudden the right inspiration is there. All of a sudden it all makes sense, and if these are all mountain peaks, and she's still holding herself that way, I still like that imagery. And I like the idea of like the bottom half of the quilt being pieced. So now I can set this aside and actually say, that is getting there. That is more along the lines of what I wanted to create. I still don't like the name Storm of Loss. That was a neat inspiration, but I don't think it's a positive thing to run with. So, to think about, okay, well, then what am I symbolizing here? If I make this a peak and she's at the top, she's still obviously, holding herself, hugging herself, kind of putting herself back together again. A positive, what am I going to do something positive in the background? Is there going to be something here around her? Obviously there's not going to be, these archy shapes anymore. So yeah, I mean, kind of have to just keep thinking it through. A lot of times when I'm at this stage and then something is clicked, I will pin this up somewhere I'm going to see it a lot, like maybe next to my desk, or I oftentimes like to look at things when I'm eating at the kitchen table. So I often will tape things up to my cupboard where I have some napkins and stuff and dishes. And it annoys Josh because he's like, why are you taping things up there? It kind of covers up the glass front cabinets. But it helps me be able to look at it. And if I'm looking at it from a distance, I'm able to better see it and get a perspective that I'm not able to see when I'm right up close to it. I hope that makes sense. Yeah, there's some things you're going to see when you're looking at an image really close, and there's some things you're going to see from a distance better. And then you're going to be looking at your quilt most likely from a distance anyway. You're going to be stepping back from it. I do like that. I'm gonna save that one. I do like that now. Again, running with another idea for the tornado section. Didn't like it. Here I started thinking, oh, okay, well, she's holding herself, but maybe, maybe I need to indicate that she's holding herself together. I tried again with like a twisty legs kind of thing going on. I have a broken heart. Angling a little bit into the negative, I feel like. Here, she's now has a vertical split running through her entire body. Her body now has more of a teardrop shape. Again, good idea on paper. Play with it on paper. Here I went smaller crack through her body, only going down through her chest, more twisty legs, and then I started playing with her hair. And this is some pretty wild hair. I gotta say, I really like this hair. So I might actually take the hair off and stick that hair on this. And as you can see, that would be pretty cool. Actually, it would be this hair because I really refined this hair better. So it would be taking that hair, let me actually put it this way. And you can start to see, yeah, how she would end up looking. And then instead of having these arches, you would have the peaks of the mountain instead. I really like that. Okay. It for me, sometimes I can give up easily, or I can just say, okay, it's not working. I don't really know why. I'm going to take a break on it. And I step away, and then, something clicks and it starts making sense. And then I can get back to it. But I never know when it's going to click. And I certainly didn't think it was going to happen on video. That's very convenient, right? So yeah, you really just never know. You never know when something's going to come together and actually start to work. So erasing those tornadoes, bringing in, making her more of a mountain peak, maybe bring that one down. And then I could piece all of that with some cute half square triangles. I could bring up taller peaks. I like that. That's starting to work. And then that fills in that background with her big hair, and her big hair is really fabulous. I like that idea. And then this, maybe even merging this with these two, was the idea of, instead of a crack running through her heart, instead being tree roots, to have, kind of more of like the veins, and I was even thinking of maybe even changing her whole body into a tree instead. I like this though. I like the tree roots element. I don't want her to be split in pieces. I don't like that. I think she's very obviously comforting herself. I think that's a positive. But even still, at this stage, I'm looking at what I've got here, and this is not making me ask a question. This is not making me, this is not particularly inspiring any emotion. It's not making me think, and it's not pushing or pulling on me. So in my opinion, a goddess quilt needs to push and pull. It needs to push in the sense of saying, asking questions, what are you dreaming of? Or in this case, it is about loss, are you stitching yourself back together again? Are you putting yourself back together? Are you whole? Are you taking care of yourself?